problem. That was great.
Thanks, Paul, for having us.
We are starting just a little bit late, so Terra and I are going to go ahead and get on. We have a few words that we've prepared and haven't had a lot of time to look them over, so hopefully
we have to read them.
They're good. We might read them a bit, and I know y'all will forgive us.
There are a couple more chairs back here. Three more.
Well, I am older. Here, we can
Yeah.
slide. Let's slide in. Here's
Amelia, I know you all have a tight schedule. If you need to leave before it's time, then feel free, and that's just fine.
Oh, yeah, there's more
It
chairs.
looks like you're hands off on that, so that'll be fine. And I'll just try to make sure.
Oh my God, wait, I don't want to sit next to you either. I'll sit. I mean, I love you, but
Okay. I don't bite. Not tonight.
Okay, thanks everybody for being here. We feel really blessed to have this many people in the room.
Hey, I just wanted to stop by, but I gotta go.
Yeah, thanks for
I'm so
popping
glad to
in.
see you.
Thank you. So Terra and I are celebrating 10 years in Carrollton this year.
And this is the longest that I've ever lived anywhere. Actually, it's the longest that I've ever had the same community in my whole life.
And we are really grateful for this community. And for Josh and Megan for having us here.
And it actually was Josh who brought Paul and I down to Carrollton to begin with.
10 years ago, we were living in Asheville looking for land where we could start a farm. Josh made a few trips up to see us, and land was pretty expensive up in Asheville, and Josh was actively recruiting us to Carrollton. So we came down here to look around.
And I had started to feel discouraged in our land search because we had looked at so many properties in North Carolina. We were driving out to the hollows of the mountains. And then when we started pursuing properties here in Carrollton, our first few leads, they didn't pan out. But one day, thank you, one day Josh took us out on a drive around Carroll County, and so that we could get to know the area and get a feel for our new neighborhood, so to speak. If we happened to drive down a road with a for sale sign, then we would write down the information, but we weren't chasing signs like we had always done before.
And that was the day that we came across the land that we live on now.
And it was by the end of the next day that we had a contract with owner financing to buy the property.
Wow.
It became our goal to use this land to create a new kind of space. A space with a new default condition.
The default condition of our culture is something that we talk a lot about in our book. And what we mean by default condition is the set of choices that we all make in our culture. If we aren't actively evaluating our choices on a daily basis and consciously making an effort to enact different choices that are outside of the default.
The choices within the default condition vary a bit, but mostly include things like living in a house, having electricity, buying food at a grocery store, living in nuclear family units, driving a car, working for money to pay for all of that.
Hell, that's what we do, Ann.
This book is, at least in part, and I'm not saying that's bad.
No.
That's not this. And maybe that wasn't what you were saying either.
No, I wasn't.
But anyway, judgment is something that we'll talk about too. But anyway, this book is, at least in part, a story of the perspective that we have gained by living in and out of the default condition for about 15 years now. At no point are we asking anyone to make the choices that we have made or to live as we live, but we do think that the perspective that we have gained through 15 years of highly examined living is worth sharing.
And so when we first moved out onto the farm, there were no structures, not even a house. And most of the land was impenetrable briars and woods and kudzu. And there was no water. We were living in a tent. Part of our vision at the time was to create intentional community and cooperation with Josh's efforts here in town. And so we have been partially successful in that, and we've learned a lot about community and cooperation along the way. We continue to host interns on our farm, and it's a big part of what we do there. I think we've hosted over 100 interns there.
That was an intern that just popped her head in to say hello and left. And she's on her way to working food in Atlanta. That's where she's headed from here. Throughout these past 10 years, we've been working to build community and sustainability efforts here in Carrollton. Terra created Theater on Cedar, the do-it-yourself community theater company that performed over 13 shows from 2008 to 2013. We worked with a few other folks to host a local food challenge and held the West Georgia Locavore events in 2012 and 2013. We've been managing the local farmers market for 6 years now, and we work closely with Patricia's efforts to network local farmers through Lat 33 and Farmers Fresh CSA.
And most recently, we've been working with West Georgia United and attempting to integrate that with the efforts of our local mutual assistance group into a cohesive effort to build this community's resilience and remove our dependence upon what we've termed hitman culture.
Hitman culture.
Oh, get that.
Hitman culture is a concept that we have been exploring for several years. The gist of it is that for several generations, our country has been entirely dependent on destructive economic systems where we pay hitmen to enact violent acts in the production of all of our goods and services.
For example, for those of us who eat meat, it generally comes to us on a plastic-wrapped styrofoam plate, and fewer of us have any experience slaughtering an animal.
This disconnect from the violence that supports our basic needs is so pervasive that we've stopped seeing it. It's become completely outside of our worldview to such an extent that we'll bemoan injustice and even ask our senators to address injustice, but we aren't addressing the fact that we're paying for it. That is hitman culture.
And we have a reading.
Sometimes, when working in the field with an intern, we will uncover a nest of mice or voles or some other critter that no doubt finds our sweet potato patch a very convenient nesting site. If I'm quick enough with my shovel, I can often spear one or two of these before they scatter, which my interns have sometimes found shocking. Many of the folks who find their way to our farm are trying to learn to tread lightly, to live non-violently, to respect life and hold sacred the place that all living things have upon the earth. How is it that I can shatter that peace so quickly with the spearing of these cute fuzzies? Surely they have a right to live as well. After the initial shock, I may try to explain myself. I am protecting my food supply and that of my community. This is a natural behavior that many other animals would no doubt exhibit. I've been asked if I plan to eat the rats, because surely I wouldn't kill something if I didn't plan to eat it. I'm not squeamish about such things, but it doesn't seem like there'd be much meat on them. Couldn't we trap the rats and move them somewhere else? Somehow, I have broken my intern's sense of peaceful coexistence with nature, of working the land in harmony with the earth. I understand. I remember living in a 3-walled Adirondack in the mountains of North Carolina when the mice started moving in at the beginning of winter. Terra and I wanted to share our home with the critters of the woods and live peacefully among them. In the vein of Gary Snyder's Porous World, we would let the outside in. I really never minded brushing the mouse droppings off my shelves each morning, listening to their scurrying feet along the rafters a foot or so above our heads in our low-roofed dwelling was only slightly unnerving. Then they ate our clothes and our bedding. We broke down, got some live traps, and relocated about a half a dozen of the stupid mice. The smart mice continued to repurpose our shirts for their cozy nests hidden in the firewood piles. We broke down again and got spring traps. The first night we set them, we caught about 12 mice and 4 traps over a 12-hour period. We continued to trap a half dozen mice or so a week for the short while and reduced the population to a manageable level. The mice finally went away in the spring when a snake moved into the woodpile. He was a much more congenial neighbor. All this is to say that my experience in living with nature is that war is part of life. My sword is my shovel. I shall not want. The violence that I carry out daily is a part of me. I will not say that I enjoy killing an animal, whether on harvest days when we slaughter chickens or in mashing bugs or spearing rats to protect my crops. But I prefer to own these deaths rather than commission them out, for I also carry the violence that I do not execute myself, but pay for in order to maintain the systems that support me. For example, in paying my electricity bill each month to maintain the freezer that stores much of my food. I pay my utility company to carry out all sorts of violent acts, from trimming tree branches that overhang power lines to removing mountaintops to extract coal. The utility company cannot deliver the power from my freezer without that violence, and my use of and payment for that power demands these acts. I have commissioned the utility company to carry out these acts for me. In this instance, they are my hitmen. We have developed then a hitman culture where the outsourcing of violence has become so pervasive that it is completely forgotten. When my customers buy my sweet potatoes, they don't think about the rats I speared to supply them with this meal. I am their hitman. They pay me, they get their sweet potatoes. That's it. No questions asked. The ironic thing about all of this is that hitman culture doesn't even make our lives easier at this point.
It's become so top heavy, so weighted down by the drains placed on our households by the top 1% and by the inefficiencies inherent to the system that we aren't even benefiting from this disconnection anymore.
Terra and I have found that life is easier, more secure, less fearful if we remain connected to our basic needs. We observe that withdrawal from hitman culture has actually afforded us substantial benefits and freedom not enjoyed by many of our peers. Through investment in ways to produce our basic needs directly, we have achieved a lifestyle where we need very little money and have a lot of free time. Our path toward this freedom has been through primitive living, but that needn't be everyone's path.
Another reading.
Where am I supposed to start on this one? When we are mindful of our violence, we can choose the type of violence that we want to be responsible for. Terra and I have devoted our lives to the demonstration that the default condition of our hitman culture is a choice. Once we all acknowledge our violence, we have the power to decide if it is necessary or not. We must all remain actively engaged in the decisions about the violence that we enact directly or commission for others to enact on our behalf. None of this is about guilt. Guilt just clouds the decision making. It's just a story. If our evaluations remain clear, we can determine when our violent actions are coming from a sacred place. Webster's definition of sacred includes highly valued and important, entitled to reverence and respect, and holy. Whether violence is sacred or not, whether violence is necessary or not, is completely subjective. It isn't for Terra and I to tell you what is necessary or sacred, but it is our work in this world to speak about the violence we see that no one else seems to see. It is our work to show that these choices that we all make every day are choices. It is our work to ensure that our own violent actions are sacred. We firmly believe that community-scale investments in local food, energy, and financial structures will make all of our lives easier, reduce the strain on our families and budgets, and increase our freedom from the destructive and oppressive economic systems of the hitman culture.
We need to rework the underlying systems that produce our basic needs and make them more efficient and connected, and implement solutions that make us less dependent on the hitman culture. While this may initially seem overwhelming and difficult, it actually isn't. It's mostly just a shift in habits, and those habits are formed by the default condition.
Some of it is really very simple with very quick returns. For example, this week, Brian realized he didn't have to order a pizza for his crew while they were working away from the farm, because he could come over to my farm and trade 20 pounds of kale that he had no other market for and get more and better food than he would have otherwise gotten and save money.
And we got some nice kale.
Similarly, I can trade baby chickens for beer brewed by a friend and get better beer for less money while simultaneously eliminating the waste of glass bottles. My friend enjoys brewing beer and gets a better deal on baby chickens than he could have gotten making small orders on his own.
This shifting is actually really fun once we start doing it. There's certainly room for larger, more organized investment in community scale solar that's tied to food storage and distribution systems and financed through some kind of local investment club and kicked off with a crowdfunding event and a big party catered by Farmers Fresh CSA, and we can do that too. But most of this is actually really easy and really small and everyday.
Having been involved in all of these efforts to strengthen this community and create more resilience, we feel that there is great potential here for us to pull together and take another step. A lot of it is already happening.
Already, in Carroll County, we have the ingredients necessary to create a movement to reclaim our basic needs. And from the Hitman culture, we have forward-looking institutions like Southwire and Tanner and University of West Georgia. We have a tight-knit community. There's already a lot of cooperation happening. We have a strong farming community. We have Farmers Fresh CSA, as well as Cotton Mill Farmers Market, which is the second longest running farmers market in the state. And it's exceedingly rare to find a community with a year-round, producers-only farmers market anywhere in this country. Now we have a strong local business center with an existing buy local movement and a vibrant downtown. And we have an existing background of initiatives to try to pull people together, some of which we've already described and some of which we've had nothing to do with.
This work, reclaiming our production of our basic needs, is work that is ours to do because we actually could do it. If anyone can do it, Carrollton can do it. We have another reading. The most common question I am asked is whether I am self-sufficient and grow all my own food. What a prospect that would be. I am sure that I could produce enough food for my family to not die if that ever were necessary. But to adequately provide all of our own food, cooking oils, sweeteners, grains, proteins, fruits, and vegetables, and to preserve all of that food, even for one household, is an immense task. It is not something that is appropriate for a family to do. Families have always existed within the context of a community that supports them and that they support in return.
There is a myth of American self-sufficiency, but even the most rugged frontiersmen could not have realistically provided all of their own needs without support from neighbors or nearby towns and mining and manufacturing systems. Where did their bullets and guns come from? We have to learn to see farms and homesteads within the context of supporting communities. And if we are to be successful in building a resilient, functional, and safe food system,
Thank you all for your patience.
it's time for this community to take the next steps, not into self-sufficiency, but into community sufficiency. The time is now.
We will not have a better opportunity to do this. We are facing so many different challenges that it's hard to keep up. Take, for example, our current healthcare debate. What we see right now are two different sides fighting about who is going to pay for our nation's health crisis. No one is talking about dealing directly with our nation's failing health.
As long as we remain polarized by the political dialogue, which is shaped by the 1% who stand to benefit from our failing health, we will never deal with this problem, and that is what we have to do on the community level. No one is going to fix this for us.
The time is now for us to work together and fix it ourselves here in this community and to create the models that other communities will use as well.
We must support each other now if we are to effectively respond to the challenge of climate change, improving our food system and energy production, fascist dystopia, our general indebtedness, threatened water systems, and improving our security.
We have another reading. I mean, it is a book reading.
Yes.
This is a Terra's take. Our exploration of security as a basic need began after I spent a play rehearsal where the cast shared stories that went beyond weather and surface conversation. We cut to the core of issues facing the diverse group of women in the room. I learned that in addition to our basic need for physical security, we have a basic need for emotional security. The conversation we had in that group centered mostly, but not exclusively, around our emotional security. By sharing experiences and emotions, and most importantly, listening to one another's direct experiences with bullying, racial targeting, self-worth, and rape, we were building empathy, trust, and mutual respect. We felt safer with each other. We didn't know each other very well. Many of us had not met before getting cast in this play, and since the play was a compilation of monologues, it didn't lend itself much to interaction between actors. Until this night, we would show up, make light conversation, do our individual monologues, get feedback, maybe give feedback on someone else's piece, and then leave. We did this once or twice a week for 2 months. The evening that we had our deeper conversation connected and strengthened us. Many of us expressed a yearning for more of these kinds of conversations, but didn't generally feel safe having them. What would it take for us to feel safe having conversations about climate change, systematic violence and injustice, rape, consolidation of our food system, and all the other challenges we are facing? It is imperative that these conversations become as pervasive, light, and casual as dialogue about the weather. We have to listen with empathy to others' perspectives if we are to meet all of our basic needs. We have to get real. It'll be fun. Aren't you tired of talking about the weather? Except as it applies to climate change in your garden. Hitman culture and the default condition are not the only options on our table, and we don't have to allow the political crisis to shape our dialogues and agendas. We are cultivating a possibility-centered worldview that enables us to envision any number of possibilities that we may not have considered.
We don't have to be limited by cultural ideas of right and wrong ways of doing things. We don't have to be paralyzed if our efforts aren't perfect and it isn't all or nothing, clearly. We just have to show up and take little steps every day.
We've come up with an activity that we would like to share to explore this idea of possibility-centered worldview.
So I'm going to start just by tossing this around. We're just going to practice that. Once it has gone to 10 people or so, when you feel like you're like maybe the 10th or so person to get it, just throw it back to me. Ready? Just toss it around the room.
Go!
Hot potato.
So now we're going to do that again. And this time, when you receive the Joker, the question that you will be asked to answer is, what is one thing that the group of people in this room would be capable of doing through collective cooperative action? Not something we should do, not something we would do, raw possibility, just something we could do. We could make the largest pizza and set the Guinness Book of World Records. It could be outlandish, it could be funny, it could be deep, it could be profound, it could be anything. You ready?
Yeah. Oh, I get the Joker.
Now you get to say.
Okay, all right. Well, this is a tough one. One thing I can do more of.
No.
No.
Okay.
I know what we is, Ann.
One thing the group of people in this room would be capable of
I
doing.
could do in conjunction with everyone else in this room is to continue to enthusiastically support the market, because it is not only a place that tries to to instrumentally accomplish what y'all are talking about. But it is a social network and a social gathering. So we could all work together, perhaps to raise more money, to expand it. I don't know, but we could all work together more and more to make that even a greater reality, because it's a wonderful addition to the community, and Ann would either, I'm sure, make a contribution.
That's one thing we could do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh.
We could educate our children. Ready? Come back that way. Up.
I don't think you're supposed to dodge it, Holly.
We could learn first aid and gather supplies to take care of each other in times of need.
We could help each other in teaching each other things about fixing things.
About what is teaching each other about fixing
You can do it.
fixing things?
You can do it. We can. It says Trump. The Joker, Trump.
Yeah.
We could.
That's a divine message.
We could get ourselves to a point where we no longer are in need of presidents. How? Is that okay?
No, I'm just,
No, it's just an idea.
By doing a lot of the things we're talking about.
We could.
By becoming energy independent.
We could take over the world.
Well, that's
From the
kind
mouth of babes. You're supposed to catch it. Get it. No.
you don't have to.
Coming back that way.
We could have a community fish pond.
Oh, that's it.
We happen to know where there's one.
We could teach and encourage each other how to engage in self-care so that we're better able to take care of each other as a community.
We could collect and save rainwater.
We could buy an enormous tract of land and put in huge gardens, and we could all move there, and we could invite people that suffer with homelessness and people from the prison system, and we could put people to work and teach them how to feed themselves and how to tidy their homes and how to take care of the children, and we could have elders come there and they could stay there instead of being cooped up in nursing homes, and it would be a place for birthing as well as a place to die with great dignity.
Oh, good.
We could keep laughing. That'd be great. Stay happy in times of sorrow. Nothing better to do that within community.
No joy. Well,
My
it
point.
works.
There it is.
Well, one of the things I thought was to get back to the roots of knowing how to preserve our own food and have our own gardens and pass that on to our children. It's expensive. There we go.
We could practice kindness and tolerance.
That's what I was going to say. I'm agreeing with you.
Here, I'll take it. We could maybe, and this kind of goes against some of it, but set up a website or something where we could barter services and goods and stuff, so it's a little bit more organized and we know what's available and stuff. Do you want it? Are we done?
We can be. Does anyone else have a possibility that's just burning and they'd like to share? Mikey?
I was thinking we could make videos if and when we decide to actually do all this stuff and say, here's what we're doing, and basically ask. There's this concept on YouTube called tagging. So when somebody tags you or your community on YouTube, it's a challenge. Like, okay, here's an idea, see if you can match it or better it or, yada yada. And it gets a lot of inspiration for that kind of thread to flow. And I think it's a great idea.
Any other burning possibilities? Somebody will go home with a great deal of regret for not having voice.
What if everybody in this room made an effort to get to know somebody that they didn't really want to, could just as soon avoid, or you've been judgmental and thinking, I don't want to be their friend. What if everybody here did one?
Could do it.
That would be beautiful.
As we are considering all the possibilities for what we could do, we could look a little bit also at some of what we are currently doing.
Yeah, I want to share some rough numbers with you. Some of this is just sort of what actually got me having my gears turn on a lot of this to begin with, and so I would want to share it now. I just got some super loose numbers off the internet. So, numbers are numbers, whatever they are. But on average, an American household in this area spends about $3,600 a month on gas, $24,000 on groceries. I'm sorry. This would be for everyone in this room combined. These numbers would be for everyone in this room combined. So the household level, it's $120 on gas, $800 on groceries, $120 on electricity. Groceries might be high. I don't really buy food. I don't know. Electricity might be low. $655 on housing, interest, mortgages. Adding that all up, we get over $50,000 a month in this room that we are spending on Hitman Culture.
So, if we are spending tens of thousands of dollars on Hitman Culture every month, what are some other possibilities? If we remove our stories of judgment and guilt from the equation, we can objectively look at our collective potential and implement systems and infrastructure that will enable us to reclaim some of the money for our local production of our basic needs.
Once we start doing this, it will free up even more money and create a positive feedback system that will rapidly build this community's resilience, make our lives easier, and take back our freedom.
And it will reconnect us to the means of our existence. We have lost that connection.
Do I start this one?
I think I start this one. Yeah. I claim no real background or understanding of indigenous worldviews, but in my studies, I have stumbled upon a few interesting ideas in this book. Interesting ideas. In his book, We Have the Right to Exist, Wubi Kanyu states that his indigenous language is inherently animistic. That is, when talking and thus thinking about the world in his language and thus worldview, one acknowledges the life in any number of entities that we perceive as lifeless in our Western worldview. Water is one of these entities. Robin Kimmerer, in Braiding Sweetgrass, also makes this claim and describes in greater detail the profusion of verbs in her indigenous language. A worldview where things are alive has more verbs because there are more actors. River is not a noun. It is a verb for water being a river. The water is alive, and certainly it is. Even in scientific reductionist thinking, a water is alive. It is an ecosystem, and even the water itself would be full of countless bacteria and living things. Ultimately, for a culture without microscopes talking and thinking about water as a living entity is simply an expression of this reality in a holistic, simple way, this simplicity is possibly more useful for us than an attempt to reduce the components of a river ecosystem into living and non-living elements. If our goal is to create a way of thinking and acting that preserves our relationship with the systems supporting our existence, it is certainly much simpler to do that from a holistic, animistic worldview than to do it from a scientific, reductionist standpoint.
Why complicate things so much? I think we get lost in all those details. We fermented beers for millennia before we discovered yeast. We cultivated and co-evolved with bacteria in our gut for our entire existence and still don't completely understand it. We have gained a lot through reductionist thought and made important and useful discoveries, but somehow by separating this from that, we decided that some things were alive and other things weren't. I think this worldview disconnects us from the rest of the world because it allows us to destroy things that we don't see as alive. Our language is deadly. Through a seemingly innocuous use of pronouns, we are verbally killing any number of living things, some of which are clearly alive. I cannot, while maintaining biological and grammatical consistency, refer to a tree with any pronoun other than it. This is a dead word, and it kills the tree in my mind. This is the first step toward cutting it down. Not that cutting down a tree is always a bad thing, I do it all the time, but when we exercise this worldview through our language countless times every day, we kill the world. We kill ourselves. And that's pretty much all we have to share with you. Thanks for listening. We do want you to know we have a plan for another book. We will be compiling a resource of stories from communities around the country of how people are reconnecting to their basic needs. We'll be releasing that book in about a year. We hope Carrollton will have a very strong story to tell.
So please support Underground Books. We wouldn't be able to be here if they weren't here. And Paul and I are happy to sign your books, and we've made sure that there is a selection of titles that we drew upon in our work together.
We absolutely recommend those titles. They're up there annotated with our notes on those titles. World Changing 101 is a really good book. The Hidden Half of Nature, A New Earth, The Vagina Monologues. There's a kid's book, Apple Farmer Annie.
And finally, if we are all reading the same books, then we're on the same page, and we can really talk about these things and get things done if we're all on the same page. And we have several follow-up opportunities also for you all to stay involved.
We have a presenter coming out for a discussion-based presentation on regenerative consumption. It'll be the next general meeting for West Georgia United on June 4th at 4 p.m. at the library. We'll be exploring how our daily consumption patterns can be regenerative rather than destructive.
And be on the lookout for a bicycle parade to the farmers market coming up sometime this summer.
The next mutual assistance group meeting is going to be May 21st or 22nd. We really probably should nail that down. We're working on it, folks.
There's also the Slow Money movement, which is a shift in community investment into local food systems. So there will be a Slow Money event Sunday, June 18th at 3 p.m. We don't know where yet.
Yeah, we actually just made that up last night. If anyone wants to help us shape that, please help. Now we do have time for Q&A. If anyone has any questions.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening.
Can we applaud for
You are a great audience.
How does it feel to have this one done?
I'm excited to have it done. It's nice. It's very time consuming to do all of this, and now I feel like there might be a minute in between things for us to do other stuff. That was funny?
Was it funny?
I'm glad you thought
So
that was
glad.
funny. Thank you. Any other questions?
What is the bicycle parade?
You tell me.
what is the
Oh.
We've been exploring an idea of having a bicycle parade to the farmers market to draw attention to what we're doing, to draw attention to the farmers market, to draw attention to bicycling as a mode of transportation.